Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dynamic Character Productions, weekly recaps of our 5th mini Trinity Falls. I'm your host, Jon Millsip, joined by two more fellow DCP alumni. We have Walimanu Beach alumni and host of our long games, Morgan Jackson, with us here today. Morgan, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm super excited to talk about this 4th episode. It's been really fun to watch the episodes. I actually was not helping out with this game, so I have no idea what actually happens, how it ends. So it's been really fun to watch each episode and be surprised and hope for certain dynamics to unravel. But I'm excited to break it all down.
And joining us from season 1, Yasala Islands, we also have David Jackson.
Hello. Yes, like Morgan, I was not involved with the season at all, so I'm watching just as a viewer and a fan. Have no idea what's coming, and it's been such a ride to watch. Yeah.
Well, let's get right into it. We have 2 action-packed episodes to get into this week. And we open up with the Iguazu Tribe right after their, right at the open of this episode, talking about the potentials of a swap. There's that looming threat of a swap coming in. And we have Iguazu saying, you know what, there's 13 of us. There's no way there can be a swap this cycle, right? Can't possibly do that. But then we cut to Kirka, and Men's like, no. There's going to be a swap. They're going to swap us into 2 tribes. And one person is going to go to Exile Island. And I don't know how Ben did this, but sure enough, we bring everyone back together. And that's exactly what's happening. We are going from 3 tribes down to 2, with one person being left on the outs. Morgan, what do you think of this twist? You've had seasons where we've had weird numbers of participants before. What do you think doing a swap at 13?
I am totally a fan of it. I think it's fun to keep players on their toes. Obviously, it seems like Ben figured it out, but people who play these online games like to try to, figure out what's going to happen. So you're always trying to come up with new ways to make the game feel fresh. And I think doing a swap at an unexpected number is a great idea. I love the 3 to 2 swap as well. With such small numbers in the initial tribes, it really allows for the swap to kind of be unpredictable and really make the possibilities of what groups might work together open up a lot more than maybe other swaps might.
Yeah, absolutely. Having this change in dynamic like this, forcing groups of 3 into 2, it really leaves a lot of weird situations. We get them over these 2 episodes, thankfully, with the way these swaps do break down. So McKenna and Alex introduce this lovely sheet with some beautiful pictures on it, taken by our very own McKenna Feeney, if I recall correctly. Oh. And each castaway will have their name put in an urn, and one at a time they'll be pulled out. They select one of these pictures, and then after everyone's picked, pictures will be removed, and it'll show what their new tribe is. So we have these new tribes. We have the Iguazu Tribe is now Lee, Selkirk, John, Austin, Emily, and Ben. And the new Kirka Tribe is Luke, Lydia, Lex, Jonathan, Lo, and Vee, with Sarah not getting a tribe and going to Exile Island. David, what are your first impressions of these 2 new tribes?
Well, as a viewer, it was kind of the most exciting way for it to break down, where you had these 3 of one tribe, 2 of another, and 1 of another in each tribe, which made it so that no former tribe had majority. So it really is reinforcing just building these new relationships, and no one was safe. No one best case scenario, even if you just wanted to stick to your tribe, you would have to draw rocks unless you could actually build these alliances to do things. And obviously a lot of people are maybe deciding, maybe I don't want to stick with some of the people from my original tribe. So yeah, I mean, in terms, you couldn't have scripted it better. It's a chef's kiss in terms of the way I think the swap turned out.
Yeah, we certainly love it when a swap gives us the ultimate tension and we don't have to do anything about it and they just let it happen themselves.
Yeah.
So Sarah not having a tribe here, it means she's not going to participate in this next immunity challenge. It also means she's immune at this next tribal council, no matter what the outcome. What's going to happen is she's going to go off to Exile Island for the round. She's not going to participate in the challenge or the scramble. But she will come back for the losing tribe's tribal council. She'll be able to observe it, kind of get an idea of the tribe dynamics through that, and then she'll join that tribe in place of the person who's voted out. That takes us to our immunity challenge. And this immunity challenge is called You've Gotta Dig Deep. In this challenge, each tribe will be split into 3 pairs to complete all 3 parts of this challenge. The winning tribe will need to make a game-changing decision after the challenge. This bombshell is dropped on these tribes, leads to a lot more tension, finding out what this challenge is. So in the challenge, in part 1, 2 tribe members will need to dig through a massive pile of rocks to locate 6 numbers. Once all 6 numbers are found, they're going to share those numbers with the second duo on their tribe, who's going to rearrange those numbers to solve 2 separate 3-digit combination locks, essentially. And then once those combinations of locks are solved, it's going to allow the last pair to work on a 77-piece jigsaw puzzle. In the meantime, though, Sarah's on exile. And she's giving us the rundown, that idea of like, is being in exile a good thing? Is it a bad thing? You know, she's safe, but she doesn't really get to make those initial connections with a new tribe. But then we get a very handsome man come on screen and say, Sarah, what if going to exile isn't a bad thing? What if it can leave you with power in this game? So Sarah's presented with a logic puzzle, a nonogram, which is a puzzle where you are provided a string of numbers which give you hints as to how to black out squares on a grid. And then if she is able to complete this nonogram by the time tribal council starts, she'll receive some sort of advantage in the game. Either of you two, have you ever done a puzzle like this before?
Yes.
Yeah, I actually enjoy those types of puzzles. So it was kind of cool seeing Sarah had clearly not seen one of these before. So she was having to try and kind of figure out the logic behind it and the methodology to solve a puzzle like that. So that certainly made it quite a bit more of a nail biter for her. Yeah.
Yeah, I also I enjoy those types of picture puzzles. Well, any kind of puzzle really, but yeah, it was fun. And I mean, for Sarah, especially because she, if I remember correctly, she's like total newbie, has never played any sort of org before. So to be put kind of in the spotlight with being in exile and the future uncertain of what's going to happen, and then receiving an advantage and how to handle how she's going to, explain that either away or to her tribe mates. It's an interesting spot for her to be in, for sure.
It is, and having been there when Sarah receives this puzzle, the look of just shock on her face as she's looking at this, trying to figure out what it all means.
Yeah.
We gave an example there, kind of like show her exactly how to approach the puzzle, but we can even see as I leave the screen in this segment, we just see Sarah's shell-shocked face there before cutting back to this immunity challenge. So the tribes have all decided who's doing what leg, and we finally get to this challenge, and the curtains pulled away, and we see this massive pile of rocks. And it's not a small number of rocks. There were a lot of rocks in this document for these teams to move.
Yeah, do we know how many rocks there were? Do we know the exact count?
I don't know the exact count. I just know it was a lot. I had to test this challenge out as we were preparing it, and we kind of just kept adding rocks to it.
Yeah. Rather have too many than too few, but they kept on just moving rocks and having more rocks underneath. It was great.
Yeah, and one of the issues with this, as we see with the which tribe was it? The Iguazu tribe, is that they kept moving the rocks on top of their other rocks. And it seemed like the Kirker tribe was approaching it a little differently. They were making sure those rocks weren't layering up on top of each other. So Kirker actually finds their numbers incredibly fast in comparison to the Iguazu tribe, who, spoiler alert, do not find all 6 numbers. And we quickly get to Lex and Luke trying to solve these combinations. Now, our viewers might be looking at these numbers and saying, well, there's 2 different sets of 3 numbers in different colors. So like there must be a reason for this. And we see Luke really kind of struggling, trying to figure out the combination here. Well, let me tell you, Luke's actually partially colorblind and couldn't see the difference in these number sets, which is why we see Luke guessing numbers from 2 different sets.
That makes no sense. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then Lex is able to figure out his combination rather quickly, doesn't actually mention the fact that there are these 2 different color sets at all. So Luke doesn't really know this at this point, but at least then with Lex finding his combination of numbers, it allowed Luke to narrow down the 3 numbers which he was supposed to use.
Yeah.
And Luke's also able pretty quickly, with the help of Lexington, to solve the combination and let the 2 puzzle solvers off on this 77-piece jigsaw puzzle.
So were the middle pair, were they able to see the screen with the rocks, or did they have to get, verbal communication from the rock removers of the numbers?
They could see them.
McKenna says they could see
So they could see them. So they could see the numbers and they could tell the different colors. But again, doesn't help Luke in that instance, right?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seemed like Kirka just had a much better kind of strategy on each phase of it. Like they were just moving the rocks a lot quicker. They were obviously not covering, the other parts of the puzzle with it. And I even like seeing, Luke had this little strategy with the playing cards there to kind of, visualize sorting out the numbers and everything. So, yeah, I didn't know he was colorblind, but they certainly seem to work well as a team to get that challenge done.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing we did see, is that the Kirker tribe did communicate really well. It seems they picked the people for each section very well. And in the end, they're able to solve this jigsaw puzzle before Iguazu even gets to find these numbers. They get 5 of them, but they can't find the 6th number. It's hiding on them. And unfortunately, Selkirk's on this section of the challenge. And that's the 3rd straight challenge performance where Selkirk hasn't performed the greatest. And he's on a new tribe now. Maybe that changes things, but it's one of those things you kind of look out for in these minis. Is there a commonality between losing or not succeeding at challenges? And right now that common thread seems to be Selkirk.
Yeah, especially when you're playing a game like a mini where you've only known each other for maybe like 2 or 3 hours at this point. And you're really looking for just about any reason to vote somebody out. Having several bad challenge performances is not good.
But despite having a few bad challenge performances, this was actually his first loss. His original tribe lost at that point. So, there hadn't even been a chance for people to really respond in votes to the challenges that they've had or test those alliances. So
Yeah, and we have seen in previous episodes that people do, in fact, enjoy Selkirk as a person. They really enjoy
no, he gives
communicating
great
with him.
confessionals. He seems really personable. So yeah, but it's one of those things you got to balance. And like Morgan said, like, you know, when you don't know for each other, especially in a mini for very long, you know, you're looking for anything to separate you from other people.
Mm-hmm. Well, because Kirk has won this one, they do get this game-changing decision where they now get to kidnap someone from the Iguazu tribe, saving them from tribal council. And we see some really interesting thought processes go into this. The Kirk tribe has to make this decision in front of everyone, so they don't get a moment to break away and like discuss it as a tribe that way, kind of hide their cards a little bit. They have to do it in front of everyone. And it seems that because it was in front of everyone, we ultimately get this decision where Lee is taken at Lowe's suggestion, even though Lydia kind of suggests, hey, let's take Emily away from here. But Emily, hearing that, just responds incredibly negatively. He's like, no, please do not take me away from this. I do not want to be leaving this tribe at all. So in the end, Kirk does in fact take Lee. Morgan, what type of strategy goes into who you take in this position?
First of all, I love this because it's like a swap right on top of a swap, right? Where we've had the swap and then right away, before you even have time to kind of like gather what the breakdown is going to be, you're already losing a person that you might have already started thinking about how they're going to fit into a potential voting scenario. I love that they had to talk through and come to the decision in front of the other tribe, because again, that leads to just some interesting like caginess where people are trying to make a decision but don't want to say too much. And then also the like how we saw Emily just like very vehemently be like, no, do not take me, which I think was a very good decision by Emily to stay in her tribe, especially because she is the only original pink tribe member on her new tribe. I think it was super important for her to be at that tribal council and establish some relationships. Otherwise, if she had, been the one taken and came back, it would have been super easy to just be like, well, she's the only pink person and she wasn't here last time, so let's just get rid of her. But as far as taking Lee, and it was Lowe that was really suggested that, which is interesting because they weren't on the same tribe originally. So I guess I don't really know. I don't know why.
Well, we do see in Lee's confessional right after this that he was in the puzzle room with Lowe, and he feels that he was able to strike up a connection with Lowe during that time enough to convince them to take him in this position.
I guess I missed that.
Yeah, it was, I think it was like really genius of Emily to just be able to shut down them taking her, because it would have changed the whole dynamic if they had taken her, because then the vote would have been 3 Kirka and 2 Tugela, and they could have easily just kind of stuck by tribal lines and had an easy vote against a Tugela, versus with Emily being there, she's guaranteeing, she's definitely putting herself in a position where she has more power in a way to be a swing vote, especially the way it panned out where it ended up being a 2-2-1 before the vote, where everyone kind of wanted her to in order to get what they wanted, and she had the power to make a choice. So it could have changed so much if she had just been quiet and said like, oh yeah, I'll go. And yeah, Lee going really kind of made it a much harder decision and much more dramatic the way it played out.
Yeah, and we even get that dynamic of the fact that Sarah's also joining that tribe afterwards.
Right.
So that's also changing these original tribe numbers on it, where if one of the original Tugela go, then you're up to 3 Tugela. And so if Emily's the one that's gone, it's a 3-3 split. If one of the original Kirka are gone, then it's a still another 3-2-1. There's just so many layers to the different combinations that can come out of this tribal, and really taking Lee here, or just someone from that original Kirka tribe, makes it so that you're setting up the potential for a lot of connections to happen. I don't know if taking Lee here is the best decision, because you're forcing these people to work together in that situation. And I know it could be a protect Lee, someone who could seem very threatening, could be someone who could easily be targeted in this situation. But now you're saying, hey, former Kirka, hey, former Iguazu, hey, former Tugela, figure this out. Figure you have two of these original tribes have to come together in some capacity in order to vote someone out in this situation. I don't know if that's the best decision for the new Kirka tribe, because it kind of dismisses the idea of original tribal lands completely.
Yeah, no, I think if they had like a half an hour to actually like think about how the numbers would break down, likely it would have been a totally different decision. But because it's just like put on them in the moment, it's really testing just how they think on their feet. And also, you know, you have this whole tribe that's making this decision that they don't even know each other. Like what are the criteria? And also the thinking, a lot of them might be like, oh, I don't want to maybe point a finger and like make people think I'm part of a duo by saying I want to protect someone. So there's a lot of different dynamics that go into that. And with it being such a short window to make a decision, it's much easier that, you know, they're going to make a decision that doesn't necessarily link in with what their interests might have been if they had longer to decide.
The other thing, and I don't know if Lo thought of this fast, but eliminating an original purple puts Emily in that swing vote position, which is a stronger position for Emily to be in, with 2 green and 2 purple. So maybe she was somehow thinking of like protecting Emily, and as far as what purple she chose, it didn't matter too much to her. But
no, that's a good point. If Lo was thinking like that, that probably was the best breakdown for Emily to be a swing vote. If that's the way Lo was thinking, props to her, because that certainly put Emily in a great spot.
Absolutely. And when we actually visit the Kirka tribe here, we get confessionals from a lot of people saying that they didn't really want to bring Lee over in the first place, but they kind of just went along with it because it was the name that was out there. Right. Luke says himself that he really wanted to bring Emily, but at the same time was nervous that taking her away from there would just be setting up for failure down the road.
Right.
And that again is part of the strategy that goes into a decision like this, and why it's such a game-changing decision is because sitting around out from your tribe could make or break your just your status amongst it, and make, especially at a swap where you're swapping to a bunch of people you never talked to before. The ability to build those relationships is so important. And there's also the fear in a situation where you're being removed from your tribe that you're going to end up with an advantage. And we see that come into play in the second episode this week too.
And I mean, another element that makes Lee's position interesting is that he does have prior relationships with Emily and Jon, that we see kind of unfold over the 2 episodes this week, how Jon and Emily reconnect. And Emily has said throughout the first 4 episodes how she is like going to be Lee's enemy. She's told this to like her original Pink Tribe members. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting little group there of Jon, Lee, and Emily. So.
And we get a little more insight into what Kirk is thinking here. Lex is really sad that Sarah's the one who ended up on exile, because he connected really well with her in those first 2 rounds, but now she's on the other tribe, and he's the lone Tugela member on this tribe. So he does feel a little exposed being the only one there. But someone who feels the exact opposite of that is Jonathan, who has just swapped with Lo and Luke, who, as we saw in that first episode, had a 3-person alliance with them, and he feels great because he is in the majority on that tribe. Before we head over to the Tugela tribe, we do find out that Sarah did in fact complete the monogram in time and received an idol nullifier for all her hard work. David, how important is it knowing that this idol nullifier will only be revealed if it correctly lands, and that Sarah will never be revealed as the person to play it?
Yeah, kind of having something that can be a bit anonymous is pretty great. But I mean, when you go to exile, everyone's thinking along the lines of like, she probably had the opportunity for an advantage of some kind. So there is a target that you can certainly get from that. But yeah, I mean, I certainly think the fact that she can kind of play that anonymously, people might suspect if she plays it correctly that that's where it came from. But yeah, it's definitely really worth your time on exile, that's for sure.
So we come over to the Iguazu tribe now, and they're kind of scrambling, getting ready for this tribal council. Selkirk kind of discusses how they just weren't able to find this 6th number, no matter what they did. And Ben, feels really worried, especially after losing that challenge, because, their original tribe never went to tribal council. So in the long run, it makes sense to eliminate one of him and Selkirk here. And he doesn't want to really throw Selkirk under the bus, because while Selkirk was on this leg that wasn't completed, this leg was also kind of a crapshoot, just depending where you move things properly. Emily, on the other hand, does not feel that way and feels that this was one of the most pathetic challenge performances of all time, as she took 40 minutes to solve a word scramble earlier in the season.
Yeah, I did write down her quote of, "Do you have arthritis?"
Yeah.
In terms of just throwing Ben and Selkirk under the bus there, in terms of just how slowly they were moving things.
So this is kind of where we see this division with this 2-2-1 split. We see Ben wants to pull in Emily to get Austin out of here, but Austin and Jon are both like, okay, but we can pull in Emily. And what we kind of see a little bit of it forming with, like, there's a little talk from like Selkirk about, well, maybe we should just get together and vote out Emily here. What do you think the best approach in this situation is for these two pairs? We have a pair of original Kirka, a pair of original Tugela, and Emily in the middle. Is it easier for them to convince Emily to join one of them to vote out one of the others, or is it easier to work with the other pair to vote out Emily? Morgan, what do you think?
I mean, I think it's the immediate reaction is to try to get to Emily, I think. That just puts you in a better position for a potential second vote. But again, we have, this dynamic of, we know that Sarah, as an original Green Tribe member, is going to be rejoining. So I feel like both pairs are incentivized to not eliminate Emily, because at the next vote there would be 3 and 3, which could make it a more dangerous situation for everybody. So I feel like getting rid of Emily is not a good move for either pair. But it seems pretty evident to me that Ben and Selkirk are just like not on the same wavelength as far as the best steps forward, and we ultimately see that in the vote. But and they're at a disadvantage with Emily linking back up with Jon, and them reconnecting. But yeah, I feel like you keep Emily in this scenario on either side.
I agree. Yeah, I think getting rid of Emily in a way is kind of short-sighted. It might be easy for that vote, but then you have this huge dynamic of this 3-3 split that unless you feel really comfortable with someone that was on the other tribe and they hadn't had much time to build relationships, it could really end into a messy situation, potential rock draw. So yeah, I certainly think if I was in that situation, I would do what they did and try and be the one to recruit Emily to your side to gain the numbers advantage for not just that vote, but for future votes.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but there is a point where Ben suggests just voting out Emily. Mm-hmm. It's kind of one of those moments where it's the two pairs are both in the same room, and Ben suggests voting out Emily, and then it's just 3-3 next round. And I think if Ben had phrased this a little better and said, rather than it'll be 3-3 next round, be like, why don't we just make a 4, the 4 of us in this room, we vote out Emily, and then those other two coming in, like, whatever, we can vote them out next. That's fine.
Right.
And I wonder how much that changes the way the conversation progresses here. Just the phrasing of we're a 4 rather than next round it'll be 3-3.
Absolutely. No, just that logic could have really made a difference where if he was able to communicate and convince them of like, I don't care about tribal lines, but saying that it's going to be a 3-3, that certainly makes it seem that tribal lines might come into play later. But if they were able to form a small group that could have trust moving forward, that was certainly another option to just kind of keep a group safe rather than original tribe safe.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if Ben is just kind of throwing that out because like in these scramble room scenarios, you end up in a room with people that you don't really want to be in a room with. And it was everybody there except Emily. So you're just like, yeah, so we're going to vote out Emily, right? Like, it'll be great because you can't, everybody else is there. You're not just going to like, be like, oh, I guess we can vote out Jon, like it just, I don't know. Sometimes it's a little awkward in the scramble rooms in those short time periods. But,
well, and we even see right afterwards that Ben immediately says to Emily he has no intention of voting her out.
Yeah. No, I always love those cuts where you see someone immediately contradicting themselves just because they're in a different conversation with a different person. But certainly the fact that Kirka hadn't lost anyone yet could have been another dynamic people coming to play. Is like, if these original tribe alliances do come into play as the game progresses, the closer we can keep tribes even to my original tribe, the more, the more that could benefit me in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And we now enter this phase where everyone's kind of just like meeting each other for the first time, and Emily's just loving it, frantically going off everywhere. Emily is such this ball of energy in this moment and just like frantically going to talk to people and says, I don't know if this is strategic or just who Emily is. I think it's probably a combination of both. Emily says things really, really fast, really, really emphatically, and then moves along to like the next person. And it kind of doesn't leave people enough time to really think about how she's approaching anything or like to digest what she's saying in conversations with her. And like we've mentioned many times, like these rounds are really fast and you have to keep moving. So I think this strategy, I abhor this strategy because I could never do this strategy. And I prefer nice, long, methodical thought processes. But not allowing people to think things through is such a strong strategy when there's just no time. And we see Emily. Oh, sorry, Morgan, go ahead.
No, I wrote down at one point, like, Emily does such a good job talking to everybody. Like, when I'm watching her in a one-on-one or even with two people, she does such a good job of telling them exactly what it is that they want to hear and saying it in a way that seems very genuine. And like she's on board with the vote, when you can definitely tell, like based on the other conversations that you've seen, that she's not going to vote that way. But I think she's very skilled in the way that she talks to people and assures them that she's with them.
I agree. Yeah. When as a viewer, she's fooling me because like when she's talking with like Lee and Jon, it's like, oh, it seems like she really wants to work with them. And then she's in a different room and she's like, wow, absolutely throwing one of them under the bus. It's like, oh, maybe she doesn't think like that, but she's very skilled. She has a silver tongue that's very good at convincing others that she's on her side. So she's definitely got a really good social game, which might be why she really was confident of like, don't send me away. Trusted her social game that she was able to, make the moves she needed to make.
Yeah, and it's really interesting seeing her do this. Well, we saw Lex do something similar in episode 2. And it seemed to work out for both of them in this situation where they just they equivocated a lot. They told so many half-truths to everyone that it was enough to convince everyone that they were working with them. And in the end, I think really what happens with this round, Jon's so pivotal in this round where everyone's kind of working with Jon. And there's this conversation between Ben and Jon where Ben's like, listen, I don't want to vote you out, Jon. Like, I'm fine not voting you out. I won't vote you or Emily out. I'm committing to this now. I will not vote you out before the merge. And we really see Jon kind of take that to heart and like understand he really feels Ben's telling the truth here. He feels that Ben, while could be a threat further along the line, is someone he can trust in this moment. He's being very sincere. And in the end, this kind of helps sway the vote between, are we voting Ben? Are we voting Selkirk? Because there was a lot of talk about voting out Ben because they viewed him as a threat. But ultimately, as we get into tribal council and everything's kind of winding down, we get to that point where it is in fact Selkirk who gets 4 votes. And then Ben and Selkirk don't even vote together.
No, I think Jon was absolutely instrumental in the outcome of this vote. I thought for sure that they were going to vote Ben out. Sorry, Ben, if you're listening to this, but I probably would have wanted to vote Ben out if I were in that scramble round. I don't know, just the way that he like talks to people makes me feel like he's kind of sketchy and a schemy kind of dude. So I would have a hard time trusting him, whereas I felt like Selkirk kind of didn't really have a good awareness of the dynamics and wasn't going to have that much pull as far as getting people to vote a certain way. So I probably would have wanted to eliminate Ben. And it seemed like both Austin and Emily were on voting out Ben preferred until Jon was like, no, I think we should vote out Selkirk. And then they were like, okay, it's not that big of a deal either way.
No, that was a pivotal conversation that Ben had with Jon because, Selkirk didn't seem to be making these same kind of deals of kind of promises of how he could benefit them in the future. And, when Jon just had that feeling of like, okay, I feel like I have more trust with him than him, then, that seemed to potentially be the thing that swayed the entire outcome of the vote.
Do you think this is an instance of experience versus non-experience, with this being Selkirk's first game and Ben having played a couple of games similar to this before? Do you think that's the big difference here, is that Ben knows that making these promises, even if you don't intend to keep them, is better than just not doing so?
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think that Ben understood that his name was coming up or was likely to come up. And he knew that he needed to make some deals and some believable deals. You can't promise, you can't just be like, Jon, you're my funnel too, because people don't believe that. But he was like, I have no intention of going against you, while we're part of this tribe. I think we work together, even if we're not voting the same, like if we're protecting each other, then we can make sure to get to merge together. And that's a deal that benefits both sides, and there's a lot of reason to believe in that deal. So I think that it has a lot to do with experience, without a doubt.
Yeah, and Ben really did make a very good move in saying the right thing to the right person in that round. It really literally, I think, saved his life in the game. So good job, Ben. You got a compliment. I vote you out 5 minutes ago, and now I'm complimenting your game. So good job.
So we get tribal council, and it does break out. It's a 4-1-1 vote between Selkirk, Austin, and Emily. Selkirk, it was wonderful seeing you on your screen. You provided fantastic confessionals, including your bus confessional in this episode, which is absolutely amazing. We're sorry to see you go so early. But moving along to episode 4, and whoa, is this a doozy? This is one of the longest episodes DCP's ever put out, and we see a lot of action here. So we get more discussion about kind of like, the tribe dynamic and stuff from Jonathan, but he's feeling a little on the outs here because he's not connecting over these things everyone's talking about. He doesn't know anything about Harry Potter or horoscopes or Broadway musicals. I think you're very hard pressed to find somebody who doesn't know anything about any of or one of those topics, but Jonathan, alas, is one of them. So we kind of have that foreshadowing, I think, what's going to come a little later. But we also then have Sarah talking about her idol nullifier and her just saying, I didn't even realize there were idols in the game, but I guess there have to be if I have this nullifier. So I guess I better talk to people about idols now. How dangerous is it, David, to just full out say, hey guys, what do you think about, who do you think has an idol here?
I mean, it's a dangerous question, but it's kind of a high risk, high reward because it's potentially if someone comes up and says well, I know a thing, or I saw a clue, or this or that, you can gain a lot of information. But yeah, I mean, Sarah's definitely very blunt in the way she talks, and that can go either way. That can really benefit her, but it could also be something that could hurt her game potentially.
Now, I do have a question because
Yes.
we obviously see the idol clue come out in this episode, but was there any sort of clue or other opportunity for somebody to get an idol that they possibly missed in the first couple of rounds?
I'm very glad you asked, Martin, because there was actually.
Okay.
In the introduction letter sent to each of the castaways, there was a hidden message to message Alex to get a clue to an idol. And I believe only one person did, and they were not able to solve that clue.
Oh.
Because I found it interesting that Sarah got an idol nullifier, and we had not seen any actual idols to nullify at that point in the game. So I wondered,
No, I was wondering the same thing. That's really interesting. Some missed opportunities that anyone had that potentially, but no one was able to find that one.
Yeah. So as we progress through this episode, we get to the immunity challenge. And in this instance, it is think steady. But tribal immunity is not up for grabs here. And you can see the look on the contestants' faces. They're like, oh, are we merging already? There's still 12 of us in this game. No, in fact, you're not merging. You are competing as individuals amongst your tribes for individual immunity because both tribes are going to tribal council this round. And I mean, this challenge, it's an endurance challenge. And this is an innovative endurance challenge. When it was brought up in our production meetings, I don't know how Greg and McKenna come up with the ideas like this, but in this challenge, all players are going to be standing on their tippy toes and using their forehead, a wall, and 2 solo cups. They need to hold a ping pong ball up and not let it drop by applying the correct amount of pressure on these cups. So you have to put the mouth of one cup on your forehead, mouth of another cup on the wall, and in between on the bottoms of the cups, you're putting this ping pong ball. And I mean, this isn't your typical wall sit or plank challenge that we've seen in previous games. This is one that really strains your calves, and any little movement can lose you this challenge. And before we get into the challenge, though, we do find out that the member of so the person who was the longest in each tribe wins the individual immunity, but the tribe that has the member that lasts the longest will win a tribal power in the game. And it's also a reward challenge. The person who lasts the longest out of everyone will receive a replica hidden immunity idol from Freak Like Me Etsy. So thank you, Freak Like Me Etsy, for sponsoring this challenge. With the rest of that person's tribe getting a 10% discount at the Freak Like Me Etsy store. It's great having these type of rewards in this. Anyone who hasn't seen it, we did post on our Instagram, a picture of Ben with his replica idol. So go check that out.
Now, they weren't playing for a replica hidden immunity idol. They were playing for a hidden immunity idol replica. I love that, just second delay that McKenna had, and the look on people's faces when they're like, what? We're going to get an idol? And then, the replica. But obviously super cool. What a fun reward. Not something that is a normal thing in these online games. So definitely a fun twist to the challenge.
But before the challenge even starts, there's more. Ladies and gentlemen. We have Lee, who was kidnapped last round, gets an advantage in this challenge because he was kidnapped. He can select a member of each tribe to receive an advantage in this challenge that will make them start 30 seconds later. And he presumes that he can't give it to himself. He presumes incorrectly because he can't affect it himself, which is what he ends up doing. And then he gives it to Vee. So 30 seconds, it's a long time in a challenge like this. As we can see, challenge gets underway. And Austin, Lydia, and Emily all are out of the challenge before Lee and Vee even start. And then Vee doesn't last much longer after starting the challenge herself. Lex gives this fantastic Wilhelm scream as he drops out of the challenge. And in the end, we see low wins for immunity for Kirka, but drops, leaving John, Lee, and Ben also going. And we get down to Lee versus Ben. And eventually Ben pulls it out, wins immunity, wins the reward, and their tribe also gets the power to sit in and watch Kirka's tribal before they have to vote someone out. David, how much of an advantage is this in the game, being able to see what happens in a tribal before you have to make a decision?
A bit, yeah. I mean, definitely just being able to see tribe dynamics and being able to take note of what relationships seem to be happening. Certainly information is so valuable in terms of how you make your decisions, how, just being aware of how numbers are breaking down. So definitely being able to see that tribal is advantageous.
Especially in a post-swap setting where sometimes, we see this where one tribe gets to watch another tribal council, but they might be starting tribes where it's you don't really know who's who. You haven't had conversations with any of these people. But at this stage, everybody knows at least a couple people on the other tribe, and it's a little easier to piece together what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. It's you're more invested in the outcome of this tribe because there are people you are rooting for and rooting against at this point, which does leave a lot to this tension here. So we're going to go with Kirka first. We kind of have Lo talking about how she strategically decided to go get her tennis shoes before competing in the challenge, and she thanked her bar instructors for helping her out on this one. We got Luke talking about farting into the camera for the entire challenge. Don't know why he mentioned that multiple times, but he sure did. Vee is talking about the fact that she assumes Lee has an advantage that's more than just this advantage that we've already seen him get, which is a very interesting thought process here. But I get it. You're taking away from someone's taking away from their tribe. They probably have something a little more advantageous than just a 30-second leeway in a challenge. But I think that one of the most important things we see here is right as everyone's getting into rooms, we have a room with Luke, Lo, and Jonathan. So that original three. And Luke just says Lex. He whispers it quickly right before Lex and Lydia join into the room. And then things kind of get a little interesting because, I mean, Lex is the only two on the tribe, so he's feeling a little nervous being in there. Doesn't know Lex isn't in the same position Emily was in last time because this is a 6-person tribe. Because it's a 3-2-1 split, Lex doesn't get to be a swing vote here. Lex is potentially okay, this tribe gets majority and they vote someone out, and like I guess I'm with them now, or we force rocks and see what happens. It's a lot more dangerous of a position to navigate. But ultimately, I think Lex does well here. But the most interesting part about this discussion is that Vee mentioned she found a clue to a hidden immunity idol. And she has this phrase she needs to say at the next immunity or at the next tribal council in order to get that immunity idol. And it really does change the way a lot of people approach this tribal council. So David, knowing this knowledge, like knowing that Vee essentially has an immunity idol, how do these tribes successfully navigate this vote?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, and I think most players wouldn't have verbalized it in the way that Vee did, but in a way it kind of worked out for her because her name was kind of taken off the board of like it's too risky to target her, so she almost had immunity that round without needing to play it in this odd way. But yeah, it's again one of those risk reward things where she didn't necessarily, and she was even kind of lamenting that like I probably shouldn't have said that out loud after the fact. But it certainly changed who the targets could be, and Vee wasn't really discussed much.
Yeah. I mean,
Please go ahead.
Well, I just think it's interesting, like just the threat of a potential idol play, how it can just totally redirect. It's just interesting how people respond to idols, right? Some people want to like flush them right away. I feel like we see that in like Australian Survivor, where it's like, if you have an idol, you're going to get votes, so you're forced to play it. But in this case, it was like the exact opposite. I feel like Jonathan still wanted to target Vee for a lot of the round. I feel like we kept hearing him say her name. But yeah, I mean, over the course of that scramble round, I feel like pretty much all the available vote receivers had their name thrown out at one point or another by somebody.
That is true. Yeah.
It was, a very captivating scramble session to watch happen for sure.
Yeah, like you said, we have a lot of names going out. Lydia is throwing out Jonathan's name and kind of suggesting like this woman's alliance between herself, Lo, and Vee moving forward. But Lo plays this really well here, where she says, I understand exactly why you want to go after Jonathan. He's a threat, but there's a potential like we're not merged yet, and we could really use his strength in a challenge. So maybe not this round, but as soon as we hit the merge, we can vote him out. It's a very clever way of phrasing it there.
Right. I think Lowe really, straddled the line of these alliances really well, where she obviously was trying to protect Jonathan, part of her original tribe, but then also really form these bonds with these girls to just give her the most options possible. And that was, just a really good social strategy for her to try and straddle those lines. Yeah.
I mean, on the other hand, I feel like it was super, I don't know. I know at some point you have to throw out names, but like Lydia straight up says that she wants to target Jonathan to Luke and Lowe, who are his original tribe mates.
Yeah.
I was like, that seemed like a questionable tactic to me. I mean, other people were saying that they wanted to get out Jonathan as well. So maybe she felt like she had backup, but I don't know. I feel like that kind of ends up being why she gets votes at the end of the day. Because she was the one really kind of spearheading the Jonathan move, I felt.
Right. And when you're talking to people that have relationships with Jonathan, you should probably expect it's going to get back to Jonathan. And at that point, it becomes very much a debate between two people oftentimes. Yeah.
So we do see Vee say that she's kind of annoyed that the only name not coming up is Luke's, because she does feel like Luke's being a little forceful. And Luke is coming across forceful in some of these group conversations, where even like that whispering, of Lex, which Vee wasn't even there for, it was like Luke's very much directing people here rather than like listening to what other people are saying. It'll be interesting to see moving forward how he can adapt his game, because I feel like if you keep this type of pressure up in conversations and this like domineering attitude, it falls back on you eventually.
Yeah, he's playing a very aggressive game, which you might have more impact in terms of how things are playing out in the short term, but people take note of that. And he even with his own original tribe, he reiterates so many times that he's going to rocks. He's very adamant about how strong he wants to keep this core. And yeah, I think a lot of people, or some people, certainly kind of see through that he's trying to force them to do something that's not in their own best interest. So we'll see how that comes out. If you play an aggressive game, like if you can get to the end with that style of play, you're going to get a lot of respect. But it's a lot of people are going to take umbrage with that style too.
Definitely. And as we're still progressing through the scramble, we have more names coming up and everything. Eventually, we do see Lex suggest to Lowe and Luke that he just joins the original Iguazu tribe here, and together the four of them just vote Lydia. And that kind of seems to be where things are going before we cut over to the new Iguazu tribe. And in this new Iguazu tribe, we have Ben feeling fantastic that he has immunity, because not even Selkirk voted with him last vote. So he feels really on the outs, glad he's immune and can just kind of navigate this vote a little.
That first confessional, I was like, I've never seen this side of Ben in this season so far. Like every confessional, he seems so anxious. He seems so, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, you finally see Ben being comfortable. And it was fun to see just how different those Bens were.
Yeah, I think he, realizes that he was not in a good position, seeing as nobody voted with him, and Austin, who he voted for, is still in the game. So, and at some point we hear Emily say that Ben would have been the quote unquote easy vote. Who knows if that would have actually been what happened, had Ben not had immunity, but I think it was really good for Ben to kind of get the attention off him for a little bit.
Definitely. And then so we then get this confessional from Jon, in which he says he has played a game with Emily before. And not only that, they were each other's number ones in that game.
But he didn't realize until like that point. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really funny. I was taking the confessionals for this tribe at this moment, and both of them come into me and are just like, oh my God, I've played this game with them. We're 4 rounds in at this point. This is like 4 or 5 hours into the day, and they're just realizing they have been on our tribe together for like an hour at this point, and they are just realizing that, wait, not only do we know each other because we've played a game together, we work together in that game.
Yeah, their physical appearance must have changed. Did Jon not have a beard back then? Like, you know, just no. I found that pretty funny too.
Yeah.
Like, they just
well, and Jon said Emily like went by her last name or something in the previous game. So I don't know.
Sometimes I guess you just don't make those connections at that point, right? If you're calling someone by a last name or a nickname, when you hear their real name, you're like, wait, who is that?
Yeah, I'm very curious what the format of this other game was that you really would not recognize, but
more importantly, there was a third member of their tribe in that exact same game, being Lee. And we see the 3 of them come together and be like, hey, we're each a representative of one of the different starting tribes. How cool would it be if we just all worked together? And they're talking it through, and they're like, okay, well, maybe we vote Austin here. Because they're worried that Sarah has something from exile. A warranted worry at this point. Not something that would save her here, but that's fine. And Jon's response to this, Jon is so fluid this round, and his willingness, the way he phrases every conversation he has with anyone he's talking to about his willingness to cut Austin and Sarah is like, I prefer not to, but if we have to, we have to. Just leaves him in this position where he can talk to absolutely everyone and get as much information as possible about this foe.
Yeah, Jon, I feel like is the star of this round for me. Just
Morgan, we haven't gotten to the MVP section yet. We have to save that.
Okay, well, sorry. I just had to say it. Good job, Jon.
We get this confessional from Lee. And he says, I don't feel great. I wasn't here. Everyone's probably going to suspect I have something. So I better just tell everyone I have an idol. We've seen it be successful previously. We had Garrett previously do it on Iriki Islands, pretending to have an idol for several rounds, which prolonged his life in the game. David, what do you think of this strategy about lying about an advantage?
You know, it can pan out, but I thought the way the conversation, because when he talked to Ben about this, it seemed to like almost immediately backfire, because Ben told him that he also got one of the clues for that. And he's like, oh, great. So as soon as Lee told him he had an idol, Ben was like, yeah, I have a clue. I might be able to get one too. And then you see Lee almost like kind of have to backtrack immediately of like, oh, can you play that for me? He's like, no, we'll need that for another round. So then Lee's in this position of like, oh my gosh, to let you know that I actually need it now, I have to admit that I just lied to you.
Yeah.
So, but if he hadn't had that conversation, he might not have ever found out from Ben that clue even existed. But it was a little comical the way it played out.
Absolutely. It's just, it's such a bold strategy. It's so risky. And in this situation, it just doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So we see Ben revisits his conversation with Jon and talks about his commitment with Jon and Emily in the room with the 2 of them. He doubles down on, he's like, I'm not coming for you until merge. You don't have to worry about that at all. We're going to be fine. I thought this was a great move by Ben. Even though he's safe here, he's reinforcing this relationship he built in the last round.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that conversation between Jon and Ben really solidified that the 2 of them, at least in the short term, are going to be on the same page. And maybe even like early merge where you're really trying to figure out who you can trust. I feel like they have some mutual trust there.
We get a conversation between Emily, Jon, and Austin where they say it's probably unlikely Lee actually has something other, like in addition to this advantage he already got. That seems a little absurd there. So they're feeling confident about being able to vote out Lee here. Jon then tells us he likes Sarah, he trusts Sarah, but if she doesn't even make up a story about anything that happened at Exile, he can't trust her anymore.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because I didn't expect Jon to just straight up ask, hey, what happened at Exile? When we finally see them in a room together, I thought he would wait to see if Sarah brought it up, but he gives Sarah the opportunity. It's like this gracious notion of, hey, Sarah, what happened at Exile? And Sarah just like straight up says, yeah, I have an idol nullifier.
Yeah, and we see it in the confessional just how important this conversation is for Jon even trusting or even wanting to work with Sarah going forward. But Sarah is able to say it, and like that was exactly what she needed to say in order to really reel it in. And Jon was certainly considering potentially voting for her if she didn't say anything to him about it. So.
Yeah, I feel like telling the truth here was definitely the right move. The idol nullifier is an advantage that is not as scary as an idol or even a steal a vote or anything like that, right? It's a reactive power.
And it's a tool the group can use, rather than, individual immunities are a lot more individual protection that, if you really trust someone, you can use it. But yeah.
Yeah.
I think this one. Please finish the thought.
I was just saying, I feel like Sarah's visit to Exile Island will not really impact her game moving forward because of the way that conversation panned out. I think, Austin and Jon believe what she said. And again, I feel like Sarah's newness to these games is actually to her advantage here, where she comes off as very trustworthy and as, being honest and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I really think that Sarah mentioning this idol nullifier here accomplishes that goal she set at the beginning of the episode of like getting the idol talk out there. Because now that two other people she's closely aligned with know about it, now if they hear anything about an idol, they can bring it back to Sarah so she can use this nullifier properly. I think it just really strengthens the power of that advantage. So we see a lot more conversation of Lee. There's Austin's names being thrown out there. Sarah's name kind of is taken off because like people are wary that she might have something from Exile. And then we get Emily's final confessional before we go to the tribal councils here. And Emily says she's just thinking about throwing a vote out anywhere. But she's worried it'll go to Rux, but she's not sure who to vote for. She kind of throws it out. It's like, whatever. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. And this is that chaotic energy that Emily brings to the game. We then get into our tribal councils. So the Selkirk Tribes first. We discussed the challenge and everything. And eventually we get to the point where Alex perfectly sets up Lydia for saying this idle phrase of, I'm losing my sense of time. It's like someone tipped an hourglass sideways. That was one of the most natural ways you could ever work that into a sentence. Lydia was given a layup there, manages to snake this hidden immunity idol from Vee, who's been talking about getting this idol the entire round, and said she's going to do it as soon as she gets there. Just never got an opportunity to say it, and Lydia manages to scoop it right up.
So I wasn't sure how that played out. So it was the first person, so they all had the same phrase. Whoever said first got it.
Yes.
Got it.
In fact, there's a little more behind the scenes to that. Both tribes had the same phrase. And someone could have said it in the second tribal council to also get an idol. But no one did. Interesting. Because they saw Lydia get the idol. I guess they must have assumed there was only one. So no one attempted it in that second tribal council.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I guess if you say the same phrase, it becomes like very clear to everyone. Like that's a strange thing for both people to say.
Yeah.
Unless they said, like, well, as Lydia said, it's just like
that. So we have a little bit of discussion about Lex being alone on the tribe. Then Luke says everyone's lying, and Lex has a very big reaction to this about not lying, which is in fact him lying at that moment. And Alex says, this is the perfect time. Let's just go to the vote. So we get to the vote. We're not 100% sure what's going to happen here. But we get back from the vote and we see Lydia does in fact have a hidden immunity idol. She plays her hidden immunity idol, which is a good thing because Lex did decide to go with that threesome, and it was a 4-2 vote for Lydia, turning into a 2-0 vote against Jonathan. And Jonathan was, in fact, ousted here in 4th place. But we have more. We have more tribal council to get to because we have the Iguazu Tribe still. And they talk about, that exciting moment at tribal council and everything, seeing that. And, they talk about the fact that there's no real set dynamic in their tribe with a 3-2-1 split. And they have a bit of discussion with Sarah on exile. They ask if the last rounds kind of impact this round, where things going. And then right before they go to vote, Lee says, hey guys, I did in fact find I found an idol because I was kidnapped. So I'm going to play that here. It's that last Hail Mary from Lee.
See, to me, that's like the nail in the coffin for the idol isn't real that I have, because if you really had an idol, you wouldn't have to announce it to everybody. You would just play the idol. And I know he has to try to deflect it somehow, but any illusion that you have an idol, I think, is eliminated by doing that.
Well, I'll give him that, he seemed to have the awareness that it was probably him, and he fought hard in the way he could, and with there being some newbies in the game, if he actually did scare one of them to I should split the vote a little bit, put a rogue vote out there just in case, it could have swayed the vote. But obviously it didn't work out for him. But I appreciated the how hard he was trying and fighting to stay in the game. But I agree, it did feel a little transparent because someone doesn't need to announce that they have it. They would just play it and smile as the vote fell apart,
Well, nonetheless, the Survivor Girls were not spying on Lee anyways, as we get to Emily's voting confessional, in which she decides to vote by pulling a card from her deck.
Yeah.
And even as Sarah and odd as Austin, and this does in fact decide the vote.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
If she had voted for Austin, she would have put herself in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Her voting for Sarah here made this a 3-2-1 vote.
Wow.
With Lee going home with 3 votes, Austin being safe with 2, and Sarah being safe with 1.
Wow.
Yeah, so let's see. If she had voted for Austin, then Lee and Austin would be safe. Ben was safe, which means that it would have been Jon, Emily, and
Sarah on the wheel.
Sarah, yeah.
And the way this game is being played, there's no revotes, correct? So
that's correct.
Automatically be.
Yeah.
Wow.
She would have had a 1 in 3 chance of going home there. Luckily, the Survivor Gods, I guess, are smiling on Emily here.
Yeah.
And she comes out unscathed here. And there you have it. Lee is the 5th member voted out of Trinity Falls.
It was interesting that she didn't vote for Lee, because she did declare early that Lee was her, I will go for Lee. I will go for Lee hard.
Well, she must have really thought that there were more votes going on Lee.
Yeah.
That he was solidly going home.
Yeah, I think she
just wanted to throw a little chaos into the mix, which isn't a bad idea, but it could have been very bad for her.
Yes. It could have, but she's lucky here, and sometimes that's what you need in these games.
Yep.
Well, there you have it. Those are our recaps. Before we close, though, we do have our MVP selections. Morgan, you've already expressed who yours is. Why don't you go into that a little further here?
Both to me, Jon and Emily had fantastic showings. To me, I feel like they're both very strong players. The 2 of them working together, I think, is a great combination. They're in great spots. But yeah, I feel like I got to give it to Jon. Emily's little snafu on the end, I think, really, she loses the MVP spot for me, because that could have been potentially fatal to her game. 1 in 3 chance of her going home, even a 1-3 chance of Jon going home. That's really detrimental to her game, I think. So yeah, I gotta give it to Jon. I think, we see him maneuver both a tribal council in both episodes, where he really played a pivotal role in the Selkirk vote out, in directing that the direction he wanted it to go, as well as the Lee vote out. And everybody likes him. I don't think he's on anybody's radar. He's not, nobody's saying his name as like, ooh, he's kind of a threat, we got to watch out for him. So solidly Jon MVP for me.
Okay, David, who is your MVP this week?
There's a lot. I got to give honorable mentions to Jon, to Ben. I thought did some really great things this time. I really want to lean and give it to my agent of chaos, Emily, because she played a really fun game and made a lot of really good moves. But yeah, I mean, that, the luck element of that one card, I think I almost got to give it to Lydia. Like Lydia, being the person to actually say the phrase, get the idol, have the awareness. I don't know whether she knew she was getting the most of the votes, but I mean, yeah, really turning the tide there. She might have some trouble digging her way out of this because she still at a disadvantage from the people that just voted for her. But she needed to make a huge move to stay in the game, and she did. So it's hard not to give it to her.
And I'm actually going to stick with that tribe for my MVP. I'm going to give it to Vee here, because just saying she has this idol phrase that she gets to say at tribal council to claim an idol made it so she wasn't even a target of this tribal. She does have a confessional saying that this is an intentional move she made. Mm-hmm. And luckily for her, Lydia does happen to get the idol first, play it correctly in that instance. But I think Vee shows enough of a social awareness. We see that Jonathan's scared of her social ability, and she knows how to leverage knowledge and leverage information to at least keep herself safe. So last week we did have our viewer poll, and Emily was actually given last week's MVP by the audience too. So Emily's pulling ahead here with these MVP nominations. But that brings us to the end of our show. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, David, both for joining me this week. And thank you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe. Ring that bell for notifications so that you always know when Dynamic Character Productions new videos are coming out and are available to you. We have new episodes dropping every Monday and Thursday, exit interviews on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and your weekly recap every Sunday. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You'll get to see everything, including behind the scenes information, and you'll also be able to get in your votes for that audience MVP nom every week. Thank you once again, and everyone have a wonderful week.